Our lives are laid out on a road of bumps, turns, struggles, and more. How do we respond? How do we endure adversity for learning and growth? I'm Aubrey Johnson, and we'll explore these questions and more on the Road to Rediscovery. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Road to Rediscovery. I'm your host, Aubrey Johnson. The Road to Rediscovery is about reflecting on life lessons to learn and grow from them, and of course, pay it forward and uplift others who are struggling through dark times. My special guest is a personal branding advisor and the creator of Magnetize Your Personal Brand. She's also the author of Dream On: How to Create the New Life of Your Dreams After Upheaval or Loss. She is going to help us learn how to enrich our lives and attract more opportunities. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Chanoa Inez to the show. Chanoa, welcome to the show. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you, Aubrey. It's great to be here.
Oh, well, likewise. We're excited to have you on. We can't wait to just hear nuggets of information, amazing insight. And if you could just maybe start us off by giving us a glimpse early in your journey, what got you into branding? What got you inspired to do the work that you do today?
Well, it starts with my book. So I suffered a great personal loss, sudden loss. And after the initial, couple of years of what anyone would call grief, the grief kind of went to the background, and I was actually suffering from a lot of residual grief, unbeknownst to me. And it affected every area of my life. So I had this long journey back to, one, actually realizing that, and two, undoing it. And the moment that I stepped out of that cloud of grief, I couldn't believe how long it had taken. And after that initial shock of realizing how long I'd been in it, the next thought was that I have to write a book, because nobody should have to experience the kind of repercussions of any kind of setback or loss for so long. And so that's what I did. And so when I finished writing the manuscript, I started thinking about how so many people keep talking about the concept of having a personal brand, why it's so important. And it is, but almost all of the conversation is about the external considerations. So, how do you communicate? How do you show up? Your website, your social templates. And while they're all important and they all, hold certainly value of their own, because I learned the long hard way that the inside of the person, the essence of who you are, that's your personal brand, and how that essence is perceived. And I learned that the long hard way, because when I suffered the sudden loss of my boyfriend in Montenegro, less than 36 hours into our move to Montenegro, it was strange, because I decided to make a side gig into my full-time business. And so I was going to have that summer off. So instead, the summer was off because I was grieving. And then I was trying to grow my business full-time. And I didn't realize all those things that are happening inside, they reflect in the business, no matter how good you are, what you do, no matter how much you care about your clients, no matter how long you spend on the computer, it all kind of reflects in your business pretty quickly as an entrepreneur. So I looked at my lived experience, principles for my personal transformation book, and then my 15 years of copywriting and messaging strategy experience to develop a personal branding program that's basically developing the business owner from the inside out.
I see. Tremendous. I mean, and from the inside out the inside is really the foundation, right? It's looking inward, having that introspective into, really assessing who you are. And I guess taking accountability to a degree of your current state. Would that be fair to say?
Oh, absolutely. And just also seeing like the things that we like to avoid.
Yeah.
We can't hide from them, right? So,
Right.
and if
Yeah.
it's happening in the personal life, it's going to be happening in the business too. So let's say somebody's afraid to set healthy boundaries with their friends and family.
Yeah.
That's going to happen where they attract these clients that are going to be problematic, because they're going to gravitate towards them, because they're going to realize they can walk all over them. Whereas a person who has, developed their confidence, that self trust and those healthy boundaries, they're going to have clients gravitating towards them who, honor them on that same level. And it's just a vastly different experience.
Yeah, no, it completely is. I mean, and I can tell just how you articulated these, I mean, versus being of one who lets people walk over you and more of a passive versus those who really honor their boundaries, right? Honor their boundaries so that other people can, treat them with respect and know where their boundaries are. Um, there's a big difference within them. And for those who are a little apprehensive to approaching others with boundaries, it's human nature gravitate less to the things um, that most troubles us, right? We had a list, a to-do list. The things we wanna do would be, like, at the top of the list, and the things that we have to do but really don't wanna do would be at the bottom of the list, right? And that's just human nature, but, it sounds like part of what you teach is really owning up to those things that you don't wanna do, to those things you don't want to address, and helping people have the right frame of mind and mindset to address those in a healthy way when it comes to just being part of your brand, part of that internal essence, and as well as interacting with others.
Hmm.
Very important.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And anything that we avoid for too long, it just starts to become bigger, or it starts to seem bigger than it
Yeah,
really is.
yeah,
So I know, I won't sugarcoat it. I know that there's going to be some level of intimidation when people begin that personal transformation process.
yeah.
But when they see just it really is much easier than we make it out to be. We're often so afraid of how others will react. And boundaries are a great example. I remember when I started, reestablishing all of my boundaries, I would just like, just my hand would be shaking before
Yeah,
having, phone calls, especially like with family members, with like,
yeah,
long histories of how boundaries were approached, right?
yeah,
And I would
yeah.
be so worried. And it was so funny because, 9 out of 10 times people were just like, okay. And everything was great. And I just, I couldn't believe it. And I thought, wow, how long was I carrying that where I didn't want to do
Oh,
that? I didn't want to
yeah,
advocate for myself. And it
absolutely.
was totally fine.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure some of the people you talk to may have even thought to themselves, "Wow, you know what? I am very glad she did this. At least I know where I stand." You know, I'm very glad she spoke up to me. I don't want to feel like I'm taking advantage of her or walking over her. Some people may have been relieved that you approached them, even though it started out apprehensive, you stood your ground and you stated what you wanted to state. And I'm sure it was a huge, huge weight off your shoulders after talking to them about
Oh, yeah, definitely. Definitely. And what people find, anything is like anything, with
it.
practice
Yeah.
it gets easier, and then what
Yes.
happens is with new relationships, new prospects,
Hmm.
colleagues, whoever it is, the sooner you set those boundaries, then there's no fear at all, because it's
Right.
just something that's established from the start.
Yeah. No, it is. It totally is. And so that kind of leads me to my next question, and it's just I don't know, a couple anecdotes that I heard you say earlier that resonated with me. And this was when you were walking us through or talking to us about losing your boyfriend. Okay. The traumatic experience. And I'm so sorry to hear that, by the way. Um,
Thank you.
um, One thing you mentioned was residual pain. Residual pain. The second thing you mentioned was cloud of grief, and I mean, to me, those two descriptors paints a vivid picture. I feel, in my mind's eye, at least, of what you were going through. Now, if I just want to make sure for the benefit of the listeners that I'm interpreting this right. As you explain the residual pain, this is pain that continues to kind of show itself like days, weeks, months, years after the event, right? I mean, is there and what would be the trigger that would bring that residual
Mm.
pain?
Yeah, so there wasn't even a trigger.
Okay.
Maybe if there was a trigger, I would have realized it. So
Okay.
basically, I thought I got to a place where, I certainly feel grief, when I think about him, I'd have like, reminders,
Hmm.
but I didn't realize I was carrying it in the background because I never actually completely really reckoned with all of that grief. So it was in the
Gotcha.
background. So I would think that I was stressed about various things that were happening in my present life.
Hmm.
But, still I had, it was a strange moment because, we're very young and he passed away from a clot in his sleep. So it was like the first day of the rest of our lives. Well, the
Yeah.
second day I woke up and he's not awake.
Oh my.
So it was not just, quote unquote, just losing him. It was losing him, losing the future. All of our plans we had together.
Yes. Yes.
Also the shock and trauma of waking up and your partner is, that's
Sure.
not for a person that of that age, it's just
Yeah.
very, there was a lot there, a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
And, um, I just kind of threw myself into the grief really in the beginning. I just felt the pain so intensely because I didn't know the things I know now. I didn't have
Yeah.
any tools. This was way before I'd ever done any meditation or anything like that. So
Okay.
I know that I actually intensified the repercussions of those kind of emotions. So
Great.
I ended up having just a few years later, I started getting like food sensitivities and then one food allergy after another, like weeks apart.
Mm.
And just my vitality basically went away, not away, went away completely, but I was, I certainly was not the healthy, vibrant person I was.
Right. Right.
And in hindsight, I say I'm grateful for that because then I had to search because these weren't things that a doctor could say,
Right.
here, I'm going to fix you. They're all like chronic and not able to be solved with just like going in to get medicine or something. So
Yeah.
that brought me to just the personal transformation journey. And I didn't realize still that I was working on grief. I just thought I was working on current stress. I didn't know
Yeah.
that it all kind of went underground. And I started meditating. I went to, Peru on a plant medicine retreat. I tried everything under the sun. And
Yeah.
I knew it was strange for how much I learned that and how much I engaged with that I just was not making a full recovery. And I just knew there's something missing.
Yeah.
Um, so when I came out of the cloud of grief, you know, just to kind of speed up the timeline. So I stayed in Europe for I always say almost 7 years, but I think it's actually 6 years. I'm a little
Okay.
lazy.
Yeah.
2012 to like 2018.
Mhm.
Um, and when I moved to Los Angeles, I was missing the States, so I decided to try Los Angeles. And when I came here, just being out of my regular environment and not seeing the same places, the same people every day,
Yeah.
it took me, it shook up some things. So I could already start eating some of the foods I used to have sensitivities to.
Right.
And
Right.
I was like, oh, that's interesting without even trying.
Hmm.
So that helped a lot. But then I was still, I still didn't realize that the self-love piece was missing. And it took a few years later, and it was like the end of a romantic relationship. And then a friend that one of my closest friends, she was kind of lamenting over the end of that relationship. And
Yeah.
then I woke up the next day and I called her and I said, wait, but you too, I have exactly the same dynamic, except one is romantic and one is not.
Yeah.
And it was like, it just dawned on me that I'd had a victim mindset long before he'd passed away. And then that cemented it for me because it was like, why me? Why us?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then so I surrounded myself with people who would give me reasons to feel like a victim because they were not being good. These are kind of
Right.
very toxic dynamics.
Yes.
And then it just dawned on me. I was like, I say, I do my meditations, I do yoga, I read these books, and I say that I love myself, but that has to be in action. So how can you love yourself and you surround yourself? You chose these scenarios, not to put any
Yeah.
blame on anybody.
Yeah.
And that's when everything turned around. I started doing a more advanced form of meditation shortly after that. And
Mhm.
everything changed. I have one food allergy remaining, and it's much weaker now. I can actually have some of that. So it was just like a complete 360, like a years long bout of tendinitis I developed. It was 5 years of that. I stopped trying to treat it. It went away. I mean, it was just very dramatic. And I realized how much I was standing in my way,
Yeah.
but I was just not seeing the obvious. And so I came home one day and I just felt I was feeling fantastic. And then it just dawned on me like, I was carrying that the whole time. And the next thought was I had to write the book because it's so easy for us to get stuck in that trap where we're like, oh, I feel better now. And then we start dreaming smaller and
Right.
we just start kind of not seeing how we've just shrunk our worlds because we're afraid of loss. And we're just accepting that as like, oh, yeah, life's good. And, you know, if you surround yourself with people who they're also doing that and to
Yeah.
some degree or another, you won't even notice it. So I think that's kind of a very scary place to be.
Yeah, that is a scary place to be, because it manifests limiting beliefs. Your beliefs are limited as far as your potential, what you can achieve, what's possible out there in the world. Because there's a level of complacency, I would imagine, that lives within those who just function day by day, at that level. And in some cases, I would imagine that those would be individuals who, and I'm not judging anyone, but those would be individuals who, um, basically, I guess, define themselves by their circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
And when the truth is, we can be so much more. And one thing I really have to commend you on, Shanoa, is that, um, a couple things. First, it sounds like your growth and your transformation was incremental. It wasn't a flip of a switch. It wasn't an overnight thing. You would learn a little bit, and you would, search and things about breathing, meditation, and then have a change of space, change of environment, like moving to LA. And incrementally, as you would pick up certain things, you would also realize, well, hey, this other area, I'm really, really missing out on, and I need to work on those areas as well, like how to process through something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And not live in trauma, not live as a victim. And so you started working on that. So it was very incremental in my mind, at least. It sounds like, and then of course there's always a defining moment where kind of the floodgates open, and you are just now ripping it up. You have a steady cadence of when you do yoga, when you meditate, when you do controlled breathing, and all those sorts of things. You have a very solid sense of self awareness, and realized early on, whether you achieved it or not, that early on, you realized that you had to do something, right? Um, People that have you worked with people or talked with people who have gone through a traumatic experience, and they're still wallowing in that either victimhood or cloud of grief. How can you meet someone where they are, to where you can help them transform from that so they can build and rise? Or is that where you meet them at?
No, I really don't recommend people even set off on the path that my book offers
Yeah.
when it's in the early days. I think it's really important to give grief that space,
Yes.
space to breathe. You got to feel it. It's not, it's ugly, but you have to
Yes.
feel it.
Yes.
But I think we're in this culture where I mean, I love obviously personal transformation, right? I eat, live, and breathe it. And
Mhm.
I went through that whole journey, and obviously the journey continues, right?
Right.
But our society, we also have this kind of like fix and bounce back, like I think too quickly
Yeah.
culture. So I really, I strongly advise people to give it time because
Mhm.
even though I did not try to bounce back from grief super quickly, I did actually just decide like case closed, I feel fine. And then I was carrying stuff I didn't know I was carrying. So
I
I
see.
think that's really important.
I see.
Yeah, but after the dust settles, then it's just time to, okay, from there, it's like, could
Let's
I
go.
start to feel
Yeah.
comfortable,
Mhm.
um, in this time of unknowns? Can I start to let go of the need to control everything? Because that's one of the most shocking things of having us any kind of sudden change. It can even be a layoff or a,
Right.
business closure. It's just like, oh, well, I knew how pretty much how everything would look every day, and
Yeah.
now I don't. And something happened that's without was beyond my control. Now, am I going to, grasp to try and control everything, or can I just like kind of settle into that and start to imagine that better can be around the corner? Because surprises and wonderful surprises also come from the unknown, right? So it's
They
just
sure do.
that's a great first step.
Yeah.
Once someone's in that space, then we can start building.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that because, again, the listeners, who can very much relate to this, our listeners, they have overcome, or or they have met tremendous adversity, and looking for ways to overcome this adversity. It could look like anything. It could take many different shapes, forms, colors, sizes, and from what I'm hearing you say, Shanoa, is when it comes to grief or trauma, there is a period where we must let that process, that we must process it through, and let it do its thing, so we can get to a state where that dust settles, right? And then from there we can really start to do that transformative work. Now I understand you didn't have that choice with yourself, because you're in your skin. You have to kind of pop that hood open and work through the yucky stuff, I guess some people would call it. But yeah, I want to thank you for clarifying that in a big way. Making sure that people are clear and knowing, you have to process and work through the trauma and the
Mhm.
grief, and so forth. So I'd like to pivot, if we can, briefly to branding. Okay. And one thing, if again, for the benefit of the listeners, if you can just give us some insight on branding. From what I've heard, we all have a brand, right? Whether we know it or not.
Yes.
And from our brand, what is our brand from a personal sense? I mean, does it have to do with, this is what I stand for, or this is what I believe in, or does a brand define you? Can you give us some insight on this?
Yeah. Well, I separate the mission from your personal brand.
Okay.
So your personal brand, so just back to my definition, like the essence of who you are and how that essence is perceived. So when you said you have one, whether you cultivate that or not, or whether you know it or not, that means people already are gathering conclusions about you. They
Yeah.
have impressions about you.
Mhm.
And that can carry over into your mission. They can assume, I can assume I know what you do for a living, but if, if there's some kind of gap, then somebody's going to have a problem.
Sure.
Because, for example, I know a lot of entrepreneurs who they wear many hats.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurs are creative. They love to have, a lot of different buckets going on.
Yeah.
But if they're not focused and they're not prioritizing the main aspects of their business,
Yeah.
you can speak to five different people and they'll have wildly different ideas of who that person is and what they do and who they serve. So
Yeah.
it's really important to kind of give all of that a home, if you will. And so that comes down to, it starts with who are you as a person. So, your values and your purpose, but then you're also going to have like these, you can call them star attributes, if you will,
Yeah.
that you have, like, and you might recognize that based on conversations you have with people. There might be certain remarks people often say to you,
Hmm.
or certain themes that come up in your, client testimonials, and you start to realize, oh yeah, this quality or this trait of mine, it always comes up, and it's like, oh yeah, actually this is something that does make me stand out. And then finding out how you can incorporate that into your purpose, your why, your
Right.
business, who you serve, and what makes you different. And one of the reasons it's so important, not just online, but especially because so many of us do so much online today,
Hmm.
is because for the most part, most people, I don't focus on competition,
Right.
but most people, if no matter what business they have, there are going to be some other alternatives, you can say, alternatives in the market for their prospective clients. So if you're going to have like a lineup of 10 people with similar offerings, how does somebody choose who's right for them? And so it's really
Right.
important that they know who you are, not, this professional avatar you show up in that
Yeah.
doesn't allow people to connect with you. Because people, you need to establish trust. People also need to know if there's alignment, because it's the people who are doing business with each other. It's not,
Yeah.
this business and that business. Even if it's business to business, you're working together.
Yeah.
And that makes it really easy. It becomes so much easier for audiences to self-select. They're either gonna, like, you're gonna attract or repel, and that's a good thing. But the problem is, a lot of entrepreneurs have a scarcity mindset, so they want to please everyone, but that really makes them forgettable, because they're going to be very careful and water down their message and kind of show up in a way that they think will make everyone like them. In the meantime, it makes them forgettable to everybody.
I see. So they should really narrow in on a niche like for their brand.
Yeah, I mean, they're that differentiation. But if they're not showing up as themselves, if they're
Yeah.
showing up like very neutral,
Yeah.
you know, quote unquote safe,
Yeah.
that's actually one of the greatest sources of loss, actually.
Understood. Understood.
Hmm.
Yeah, because they get forgotten, and their message is diluted, and no one's quite clear on what they stand for, or where they are, or what service or product they provide. Or, I mean, if it's a
Yeah.
business to business, right?
Right. And it's so important for establishing, authority, expertise. A
Yes.
lot of people, they feel like it's vain, like, oh, I don't want to have to put a selfie on LinkedIn. I don't want to have to show
Yeah.
up on video.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they have to realize that, you are a faceless person. You're just a name on a screen, and they see what business you're doing. They have to hear your perspectives. That can be sometimes just text based,
Yeah.
seeing, your words.
Yeah.
But maybe they want to hear your voice sometimes. All these different elements, what they do is, you're basically building a 3D model of yourself online. And
Online.
so people are able to see things, get these cues that are conscious and subconscious to
Mhm.
decide if you are somebody that they want to work with. So a lot of people miss out, and they kind of, they basically avoid visibility until they can't avoid it anymore.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's pretty eminent, I would imagine. You know. Uh, you spoke of one thing that resonated with me in a big way, and that is the you know people thinking, oh, it's vain to put my picture out there, and my mantra, or maybe a slogan, or or even attributes, right? Things that I've done, that really paints me in a good picture of accomplishments and so forth, accolades. When really, yeah, it's not vain, and it tells and shows people who you are. Okay, but at the same time, from a branding standpoint, to back that up, there has to be common practices that that individual does of their personal branding and how they interact with people to come through genuine and authentic. Would that be right? They still need to obviously back that up in how they interact with people and establishing relationships.
Yeah, they definitely have to do that. And that's one of the scariest parts for so many people. They just really feel like they're supposed to show up how, whoever the most successful people are in their
Yeah,
field or on their LinkedIn feeds, they're supposed to emulate them. And that can get them some short-term wins, but it's not sustainable, because there's a disconnect.
yeah.
Um, and yeah, so I think it's really important, yes, to talk about those things. I wouldn't actually recommend talking about the attributes necessarily, but
Okay.
I think it's important to know what they are,
Hmm.
and then incorporate them into, your marketing. Like if somebody says
Okay.
you have this presence that is like, it's very inspiring, right?
Hmm.
When every time people interact with you, they leave like, they just feel like, wow, they're ready to take on the world. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, maybe you're a person who would want to consider, getting on stage, because it's like, if that is something that's just so inherent in who you are, you have
Yeah.
that gift,
Yeah.
then it's worth exploring that and seeing if that, you can incorporate that in your visibility strategy.
Gotcha. Gotcha. One thing I was kind of really wondering, Shanoa, is we talk about personal brands, and with companies and businesses, we talk about commercial brands or a professional brand, right? A business brand, right? But let's say we take an entrepreneur, though, or let's say even a solopreneur, which has been one of the catchphrases or new terms lately. For a solopreneur, where there's as they're solo for one, and there is a pretty sizable degree of establishing their personal brand as an individual, right?
Right. Hmm.
Okay, and then they have this business side, which is the entrepreneur spirit of whatever product or service they provide. Maybe they're a public speaker,
Hmm.
and there's a branding in that space, I
Right.
guess. So, what do you advise? I mean, in a scenario like that, are we do we compartmentalize and we have our personal brand and our business brand, or for that solopreneur, is it just like a kind of like a melting pot of both together that makes one big brand, or what does that look like for that type of scenario?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of solopreneurs, that's not usually the question, because they usually just, their personal brand is usually, the end all be
Yeah,
all.
yeah,
But yeah, so when there's a business brand in the equation, I think it's very important that, if somebody goes to your website, customer goes to your website, it should be all about your business's brand,
yeah.
except for, a page about, the founder, about page.
Hmm.
Your media appearances, that founder gets on a podcast. I don't want you trying to squeeze yourself into your business brand. You should represent your brand, your business. When you speak about it, it should
Yes,
be on brand for them. But now it's time for us to get to know you. So in those cases, there are fun ways to find, what are the bridges that connect the founder to their actual brand. But it's not about fitting one into the other.
I
And
see.
that's not usually difficult for the business sizes that I work with, the business owners, the sizes of their businesses, because usually when somebody starts a business, there's so much of them and their purpose in that business, as
Oh,
opposed to
sure.
like, Fortune 500 company where the founder is long gone.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Okay. Well, that makes sense. And I appreciate that clarification as well. It's not like one fitting into the other or
No,
okay.
absolutely not. Yeah,
Okay.
and that's really important, because I've seen people try and, replace their their brand messaging on their sites
Mhm.
with their personal brand messaging. And it's
Yeah.
important that if you have these two entities, that that's not the case. Whereas if it's like, consulting, service based company, yeah, you can go personal branding all the way.
Nice. Okay. Well, that makes a lot of sense. Which brings us to um your thoughts and insights, and maybe even any experience you may have had when it comes to, dare I say it, damage control of one's brand, whether it's an
Ah.
individual or a business. A personal brand. I mean, I guess it can happen even, yeah, as a personal brand, in how we come across and show up for our
Mhm.
family and friends and coworkers and colleagues, right? And something happens to where maybe this event doesn't paint us in the best light,
Mm.
okay, and it starts to maybe have a potential to change people's perceptions, or not perceptions but impressions of us,
Right, right.
which then could impact your brand, I mean, how, I mean, how is there such thing as a damage control for your brand? And I say damage control very, very apprehensively because I don't want to sound superficial, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So, I mean, a business obviously need to do damage control because you're talking
right.
about an impact on the bottom line, right? I mean, whether it's the word gets out about, hey, this company has bad practices, bad customer service, and then
Hmm.
you're 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 just out of business before you know it, right? So there is some degree of damage control there. I don't know in a personal sense with branding if there's some damage control, but do you have any insights or any thoughts
Yeah.
on whether or not there is damage control with branding, period?
Ooh, I definitely think there should be. Like
Okay.
you said, businesses, people have that covered. They go to crisis communications, public relations firms, and
Yeah.
they're really specialized in that. But you know, people usually come to me because they need to start becoming more visible in their businesses, or they've hit a plateau and they've tried everything and they realize, okay, it's
Yeah.
that inner work. I have to do this for me to move on. So
Right.
I haven't encountered anything yet where somebody came
Okay.
to me because of that.
Okay.
But I often talk about the importance of our reputations when I talk about personal brands because they're two different things, but you can't separate them. So
Yeah.
every interaction somebody's having with you, that's it's adding to this picture they have of you, this
Right.
perception of you.
Yeah.
So of course it would be different on a case by case basis, but I would really just I would really recommend people just take the honest route, whatever it is, owning up to it.
Yeah.
Um, People are a lot more forgiving than I think people believe. And it's that kind of genuine accountability
Yep.
is so rare nowadays, and people, they really appreciate it. And I think, minus, we're not going to talk about like bot trolls online. If we're talking
No.
about like real accounts, real people, on
Right.
LinkedIn, I think if you take ownership, I think it's one, it's responsible, but two, people start to see you as this whole person, and you
Yeah.
can start to rebuild trust because
Right.
that's another reason why it's so important to show up as yourself. Because if
Yes.
you were showing up as this like I have on my professional costume today and I'm untouchable and I'm perfect, and then somebody like that has some kind of reputation crisis, it's going to be very difficult to repair that because if you were showing up as yourself, even if you weren't super polished, perfect, you
Yeah.
know, all those things that you think you need to be that you don't actually have to be, then
Right.
people would say, well, I know, Susan, I know her. Like, no, I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt. She made a mistake. She owned up to it. But
Yeah.
if you were, kind of this like untouchable, false persona, you don't really have much to work with there.
Yeah, you're really setting yourself up for, if there's a mishap, you have like zero margin for error because you've given off these airs of perfection anyway, right? So, yeah, the first time there's a mix up or there's a question about your ethics, then that's hard to repair. And being forthcoming, there is power in being forthcoming, holding yourself accountable, and things like that is as you mentioned. So yeah, that's those things are incredibly important for sure. So Chanoa, in your book, if there was a one primary message, okay, and I apologize, I'm going to pivot now from the business sense to personal sense.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so if there's a primary message that your book would have for someone who feels like they're kind of in a rut or they are holding themselves to limited beliefs of what they can achieve, of
Mhm.
what's out there for them, and their true potential. What would that primary message of your book be for someone in that
Mm.
situation or circumstance?
It would be no matter what happens, you can always come back from it. And reinvention is your birthright.
Oh, I love that. Reinvention is your birthright. Clip it. Now, okay. Here's the reason why I said clip it, Chanoa. And I know this is the nerd part of me coming out now. So I said clip it because, wow, I said it multiple times. I said it because in this platform here, I create the content in multiple ways, like video shorts and things like that. And this platform has the technology where it uses, intelligence for finding those poignant moments to create, but you can also create it yourself by just saying clip it while you're in the midst of recording. And so
Wow.
that was very poignant, very profound. And once again, if you don't mind, Chanoa, can you repeat that for those in the cheap seats?
Reinvention is your birthright.
Love it. Absolutely love it. People need to understand that. This goes out to all the listeners of this show in this episode. Reinvention is your birthright. Always keep that in mind, especially during the lowest of low times. As you know, we all go through them. Keep this at the forefront of your mind so you know that you are able, you do matter, and you have every right to reinvent yourself, redefine yourself, and transform. Chanoa Inez, man, it's been such a pleasure, such a delight having you on the show. How can the listeners follow you and learn about your great work and connect with you and pick up a copy of your book?
Yeah, thanks, Aubrey. It's been a pleasure. You can find everything on my website, chanoainez.com, chanoainez.com.
Wonderful. We will have that website in the episode show notes so the listeners can click the link, learn all about you, purchase a copy of the book, read more about you while listening to this wonderful conversation. Chanoa, I can't thank you enough for coming on to the show. I can't thank you enough for your transparency and your amazing, incredible insights when it comes to branding. I want to thank you for your patience and your flexibility in pivoting with me between personal branding and professional branding. You were a champion as I knew you would be. So I hope we can stay in touch and hopefully bring you back on the show sometime in the future.
That'd be wonderful. Thank you so much, Aubrey.
Oh, absolutely. And I want to thank all of you for tuning in and listening. And look, in our day-to-day lives, there's always struggles, there's always adversities. And as we meet these struggles and adversities, you may think you're alone, but you're not alone. And hope is always around the corner. I humbly ask that you please share this show with someone you know, someone you love who needs motivation, inspiration, and support. And when it all comes down to it, we're just roadies on this journey of life. And it sure feels good having you right alongside me. Thanks again for listening. We'll chat again soon. We really hope you enjoyed this episode of The Road to Rediscovery. We'd love to hear from you. Shoot us an email at roadtorediscoverypodcast@gmail.com and leave us any questions or comments you may have.